Riddick, you are up first.
Yeah, well, I'm focusing on the Chicago Bears, and I still know if you can address at the trade deadline what they need addressed, and that's the offensive line, which has really stifled the ability of this offense to generate a consistent run game and give Nick Foles and or Mitch Trubisky when he was starting the kind of protection that's necessary. And, they need a wide receiver as well. They need someone who could actually help round out that crew as well. So I think they're stuck with what they have.
I'm glad that New England was part of our production meeting. New England needs wide receivers. They just traded for Isaiah Ford. Last year they traded for Mohamed Sanu. With the recent injuries of both Julian Edelman and N'Keal Harry, Isaiah Ford could play in the slot for them. This is 11 out of 12 regular seasons that the Patriots have made a trade.
Well, the Cowboys are in the news today, but not for anything that they'll be doing at the trade deadline. Obviously seeing Michael Gallup catching passes here, but it looks like Andy Dalton's not going to be able to play this week. He's been placed on the reserve COVID-19 list. There's been speculation about the Cowboys making a move of wide receiver. They said it's not happening. So all eyes on the quarterback and what they do there this week.
That's right, Adam. Michael Gallup going nowhere, but let's stick with that division, the Philadelphia Eagles. Howie Roseman, the GM, generally is active around this time, but his main commodity, tight end Zach Ertz, is on the injured reserve. He has an eye ankle sprain, so he can't be moved. Ertz had been unhappy with his contract, and that's why he would have been available, but not now.
Hey, Chris, I got my eye on the Green Bay Packers. We know that they've shown interest in getting a wide receiver in Will Fuller, but not everybody in the Packers organization is on board to make this trade happen or to make any trade with a wide receiver or to get Aaron Rodgers a weapon here. So we'll be able to see over the next few hours, or at least the next hour, of whether or not they'll be able to come to a decision whether or not they're going to go with getting Aaron another weapon.
Well, Diana, to your point, Davante Adams could really use a helping hand there in Green Bay. If you look at this full screen, Davante Adams by himself. And remember, he's only played 4.5 games. 43 catches, 502 yards, 7 receiving touchdowns. Now, make no mistake, he is an outstanding player. But if every other Packers wide receiver was combined into one player this year, 38 catches, 622 yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, Davante Adams has been responsible for over 25% of the Packers' total offense. Lewis, I know it's hard to make a trade right now, and I understand that COVID only complicates things further. But are the Packers making a mistake if they don't end up with a wide receiver in the next 45 or so minutes?
Yeah, this is an interesting situation, Field, because just a couple of weeks ago when we were up there for a Monday night game between them and the Atlanta Falcons, they were just coming off of a game against the New Orleans Saints where Allen Lazard was absolutely every bit the number 2 wide receiver that they had been looking for. A big receiver who could play inside, play outside, was averaging almost 20 yards per catch. And him and Marquez Valdez-Scantling were looking really good as far as them being a trio, along with Davante Adams, who was also at the same time trying to, come back from an injury. And I really thought that this was a situation where Brian Gutekunst, the general manager, looked pretty smart in terms of having belief in this young receiving corps. But then Allen Lazard gets hurt, and everything starts to crumble. Obviously, the running game with Aaron Jones getting hurt starts to take a hit too, on top of the fact that he's a tremendous receiver out of the backfield. So I think, again, this is a situation where injury has kind of exacerbated or rather magnified some of the problems, and they really need Allen Lazard to come back because, he was a nice compliment. It was a very nice compliment, again, in the short and intermediate and the deep part of the field. So I think as long as they get him back, they'll be fine. But if they don't, then it could spell trouble. So maybe they will be buyers at this point. I just don't know if they're going to be able to swing a deal for someone.
Yeah, no question in my mind that they should try to add a receiver here because when you think about what Lewis just said about Lazard's injury and everything going on with COVID, we haven't seen the development of Valdez-Scantling, which we all thought we were going to. And hopefully they're going to be playing into January. And when you look at what's going on in their conference, Tampa Bay adds Antonio Brown. Seattle just adds 3 defensive players from Jamal Adams, Snacks Harrison, and now they add Carlos Dunlap in a recent trade. So if I'm Green Bay and the price is reasonable to get somebody like Kenny Stills or William Fuller, who is explosive, even when Lazard comes back, that depth will be necessary between now and hopefully, if you're a Packer fan, well into January.
Yeah, and Mike, the way I understand it, it's Lazard's injury that is really the biggest concern, And guys, we go back to the draft here when we know that they took Jordan Love in the first round. We know now what Aaron Rodgers' response was to all that. A lot of drinking for a lot of different reasons, but also because Green Bay didn't get him that weapon. I feel like this could be such a good win-win situation for this team. They're able to get their quarterback of the future in the draft and be able to get Aaron Rodgers a weapon here through a trade. You know, you look at the rest of the NFC, you look at the other teams that they're going to be competing against in the playoffs, they all have 2 to 3 number one type receivers, at least the ones that would compete with them. This would be a great opportunity. And guys, we haven't even talked about the defense. They have done such a bad job stopping the run this season. That's another area that Green Bay should get engaged in. But as I'm told right now, it seems it's going to probably most likely be an offensive weapon if they can agree that that's the direction they want to go in. But of course, the clock is ticking.
Yeah, and there was a reference to Marquez Valdes-Scantling and his development. He was fine as a number 3. As a number 3, that was the guy that Aaron Rodgers saw promise in. But when Lazard went out, Valdes-Scantling could not step up into that next role. So that was a big setback. They really need Aaron Jones healthy, and I think they could live with it. But having another receiver, certainly for the Packers, Aaron Rodgers wouldn't complain. But Valdes-Scantling being a number 2 just doesn't work for them.
Well, the Packers have at one point been viewed as sort of a conservative organization, but we know that Brian Gutekunst just 2 years ago in free agency, incredibly aggressive. The clock is ticking, Goody, to make one more move. And it might be on defense, too, as Diana was just referencing, because I have 2 words for you. Dalvin Cook. He scored 4 touchdowns on the Vikings' first 4 drives on Sunday. First player in NFL history to ever do that. From DeAndre Hopkins.